Welcome to Sleepy Folktales. My name is Elias, and I'll be your guide tonight. Here on this channel we share gentle stories drawn from folklore and timeless traditions, told slowly to help you unwind, relax, and drift into peaceful rest. If you enjoy these stories, I'd love for you to join our growing community. A simple like or subscription helps the channel, and it's always fascinating to read in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Tonight, we'll be diving into a classic tale from the Brothers Grimm, one of those stories that has travelled across generations, carrying with it both mystery and charm. All you need to do is get comfortable, let go of the day, and allow the words to guide you gently toward calm. Before we begin tonight's story, let's take a moment to settle in. Find a position that feels most comfortable for you, lying down or simply resting back. Allow the weight of your body to sink into the surface beneath you, knowing that here, in this moment, there is nothing you need to do. Let your shoulders drop a little lower, your jaw soften, and your hands rest loosely by your side. With each breath in, feel a quiet sense of calm filling you. With each breath out, imagine the day's thoughts and worries slowly drifting away. The world around you grows softer, quieter, as though the night itself is wrapping you in stillness. Your mind clears, your body relaxes, and you are ready to be carried by the gentle rhythm of a timeless tale. A fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Near a great forest there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife, and his 2 children. The boy's name was Hansel and the girl's Gretel. They had very little to bite or to sup, and once, when there was great dearth in the land, the man could not even gain the daily bread. As he lay in bed one night thinking of this and turning and tossing, he sighed heavily and said to his wife, "What will become of us? We cannot even feed our children. There is nothing left for ourselves." "I will tell you what, husband," answered the wife. "We will take the children early in the morning into the forest where it is thickest. We will make them a fire, and we will give each of them a piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will never find the way home again, and we shall be quit of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I cannot do that. I cannot find in my heart to take my children into the forest and to leave them there alone. The wild animals would soon come and devour them." "Oh, you fool," said she, "then we will all 4 starve. You had better get the coffins ready." And she left him no peace until he consented. "But I really pity the poor children," said the man. The 2 children had not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and said to Hansel, "It is all over with us." "Do be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel, "and do not fret. One will manage something." And when the parents had gone to sleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the back door and slipped out. The moon was shining brightly, and the white flints that lay in front of the house glistened like pieces of silver. Hansel stooped and filled the little pocket of his coat as full as it would hold. Then he went back again and said to Gretel, "Be easy, dear little sister, and go to sleep quietly. God will not forsake us," and laid himself down again in his bed. When the day was breaking and before the sun had risen, the wife came and awakened the 2 children, saying, "Get up, you lazy bones. We are going into the forest to cut wood." Then she gave each of them a piece of bread and said, "That is for dinner, and you must not eat it before then, for you will get no more." Gretel carried the bread under her apron, for Hansel had his pockets full of the flints. Then they set off all together on their way to the forest. When they had gone a little way, Hansel stood still and looked back towards the house, and this he did again and again till his father said to him, "Hansel, what are you looking at? Take care not to forget your legs." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking at my little white kitten, who is sitting up on the roof to bid me goodbye." "You young fool," said the woman, "that is not your kitten, but the sunshine on the chimney pot." Of course, Hansel had not been looking at his kitten, but had been taking every now and then a flint from his pocket and dropping it on the road. When they reached the middle of the forest, the father told the children to collect wood to make a fire to keep them warm, and Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood enough for a little mountain jay, and it was set on fire, and when the flame was burning quite high, the wife said, "Now lie down by the fire and rest yourselves, you children, and we will go and cut wood, and when we are ready we will come and fetch you." So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and at noon they each ate their pieces of bread. They thought their father was in the wood all the time, as they seemed to hear the strokes of the axe, but really it was only a dry branch hanging to a withered tree that the wind moved to and fro. So when they had stayed there a long time, their eyelids closed with weariness, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they woke, it was night, and Gretel began to cry, and said, "How shall we ever get out of this wood?" But Hansel comforted her, saying, "Wait a little while longer, until the moon rises, and then we can easily find the way home." And when the full moon got up, Hansel took his little sister by the hand, and followed the way where the flint stones shone like silver, and showed them the road. They walked on the whole night through, and at the break of day they came to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the wife opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, why did you sleep so long in the wood? We thought you were never coming home again." But the father was glad, for it had gone to his heart to leave them both in the woods alone. Not very long after that there was again great scarcity in those parts, and the children heard their mother say at night in bed to their father, "Everything is finished up. We have only half a loaf, and after that the tale comes to an end. The children must be off. We will take them farther into the wood this time, so that they shall not be able to find the way back again. There is no other way to manage." The man felt sad at heart, and he thought, it would better to share one's last morsel with one's children. But the wife would listen to nothing that he said, but scolded and reproached him. He who says A must say B too, and when a man has given in once he has to do it a second time. But the children were not asleep, and had heard all the talk. When the parents had gone to sleep, Hansel got up to go out and get more flint stones, as he did before, but the wife had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. But he comforted his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel, and go to sleep quietly, and God will help us." Early the next morning the wife came and pulled the children out of bed. She gave them each a little piece of bread, less than before, and on the way to the wood Hansel crumbled the bread in his pocket, and often stopped to throw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, what are you stopping behind and staring for?" said the father. "I am looking at my little pigeon sitting on the roof to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "You fool," said the wife, "that is no pigeon, but the morning sun shining on the chimney pots." Hansel went on as before and strewed breadcrumbs all along the road. The woman led the children far into the wood, where they had never been before in all their lives. And again there was a large fire made, and the mother said, "Sit still there, you children, and when you are tired you can go to sleep. We are going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening, when we are ready to go home, we will come and fetch you." So when noon came, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had strewed his along the road. Then they went to sleep, and the evening passed, and no one came for the poor children. When they awoke, it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Wait a little, Gretel, until the moon gets up. Then we shall be able to see the way home by the crumbs of bread that I have scattered along it." So when the moon rose they got up, but they could find no crumbs of bread, for the birds of the woods and of the fields had come and picked them up. Hansel thought they might find the way all the same, but they could not. They went on all that night, and the next day from the morning until the evening, but they could not find the way out of the wood, and they were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but the few berries they could pick up. And when they were so tired that they could no longer drag themselves along, they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house. They were always trying to get back to it, but instead of that they only found themselves farther in the wood, and if help had not soon come they would have been starved. About noon they saw a pretty snow-white bird sitting on a bough and singing so sweetly that they stopped to listen. And when he had finished, the bird spread his wings and flew before them, and they followed after him until they came to a little house, and the bird perched on the roof. And when they came nearer they saw that the house was built of bread and roofed with cakes, and the window was of transparent sugar. "We will have some of this," said Hansel, "and make a fine meal. I will eat a piece of the roof, Gretel, and you can have some of the window that will taste sweet." So Hansel reached up and broke off a bit of the roof, just to see how it tasted, and Gretel stood by the window and gnawed at it. Then they heard a thin voice call out from inside, "Nibble, nibble, like a mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?" And the children answered, "Never mind, it is the wind." And they went on eating, never disturbing themselves. Hansel, who found that the roof tasted very nice, took down a great piece of it, and Gretel pulled out a large round window pane, and sat her down and began upon it. Then the door opened, and an aged woman came out, leaning upon a crutch. Hansel and Gretel felt very frightened, and let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Ah, my dear children, how come you here? You must come indoors and stay with me. You will be no trouble." So she took them each by the hand and led them into her little house, and there they found a good meal laid out, of milk and pancakes, with sugar, apples, and nuts. After that she showed them 2 little white beds, and Hansel and Gretel laid themselves down on them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman, although her behaviour was so kind, was a wicked witch, who lay in wait for children, and had built the little house on purpose to entice them. When they were once inside, she used to kill them, cook them, and eat them, and then it was a feast day with her. The witch's eyes were red, and she could not see very far, but she had a keen scent, like the beasts, and knew very well when human creatures were near. When she knew that Hansel and Gretel were coming, she gave a spiteful laugh, and said triumphantly, "I have them, and they shall not escape me." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she got up to look at them, and as they lay sleeping so peacefully with round rosy cheeks, she said to herself, "What a fine feast I shall have!" Then she grasped Hansel with her withered hand, and led him into a little stable, and shut him up behind a grating, and call and scream as he might, it was no good. Then she went back to Gretel and shook her, crying, "Get up, lazy bones, fetch water, and cook something nice for your brother. He's outside in the stable, and must be fattened up, and when he is fat enough I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was of no use. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. And so the best kind of victuals was cooked for poor Hansel, while Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Each morning the old woman visited the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger, that I may tell if you will soon be fat enough." Hansel, however, used to hold out a little bone, and the old woman, who had weak eyes, could not see what it was, and supposing it to be Hansel's finger, wondered very much that it was not getting fatter. When 4 weeks had passed and Hansel seemed to remain so thin, she lost patience and could wait no longer. "Now then, Gretel," cried she to the little girl, "be quick and draw water. Be Hansel fat or be he lean? Tomorrow I must kill and cook him." Oh, what a grief for the poor little sister to have to fetch water, and how the tears flowed down over her cheeks. "Dear God, pray help us," cried she. "If we had been devoured by wild beasts in the wood, at least we should have died together." "Spare me your lamentations," said the old woman. "They are of no avail." Early next morning Gretel had to get up, make the fire, and fill the kettle. "First we will do the baking," said the old woman. "I knave heated the oven already and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel towards the oven, out of which the flames were already shining. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly hot, so that the bread may be baked." And Gretel once in, she meant to shut the door upon her and let her be baked, and then she would have eaten her. But Gretel perceived her intention and said, "I don't know how to do it. How shall I get in?" "Stupid goose," said the old woman. "The opening is big enough, do you see? I could get in myself." And she stooped down and put her head in the oven's mouth. Then Gretel gave her a push so that she went in farther, and she shut the iron door upon her and put up the bar. Oh, how frightfully she howled! But Gretel ran away and left the wicked witch to burn miserably. Gretel went straight to Hansel, opened the stable door and cried, "Hansel, we are free. The old witch is dead." Then out flew Hansel like a bird from its cage as soon as the door is opened. How rejoiced they both were! How they fell each on the other's neck and danced about and kissed each other. And as they had nothing more to fear, they went over all the old witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests of pearls and precious stones. "This is something better than flint stones," said Hansel, as he filled his pockets, and Gretel, thinking she also would like to carry something home with her, filled her apron full. "Aye, now, away we go," said Hansel, "if we only can get out of the witch's wood." When they had journeyed a few hours, they came to a great piece of water. "We can never get across this," said Hansel. "I see no stepping stones and no bridge." "And there is no boat either," said Gretel, "but here comes a white duck. If I ask her, she will help us over." So she cried, "Duck, duck, here we stand, Hansel and Gretel on the land. Stepping stones and bridge we lack. Carry us over on your nice white back." And the duck came accordingly, and Hansel got upon her and told his sister to come too. "No," answered Gretel, "that would be too hard upon the duck. We can go separately, one after the other." And that was how it was managed, and after that they went on happily until they came to the wood, and the way grew more and more familiar, till at last they saw in the distance their father's house. Then they ran till they came up to it, rushed in at the door, and fell on their father's neck. The man had not had a quiet hour since he left his children in the wood, but the wife was dead. And when Gretel opened her apron, the pearls and precious stones were scattered all over the room, and Hansel took one handful after another out of his pocket. Then was all care at an end, and they lived in great joy together. My tale is done. There runs a mouse. Whosoever catches it may make himself a big fur cap out of it. It was the middle of winter, and the snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky, and a queen sat at her window working, and her embroidery frame was of ebony. And as she worked, gazing at times out on the snow, she pricked her finger, and there fell from it 3 drops of blood on the snow. And when she saw how bright and red it looked, she said to herself, "Oh, that I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the embroidery frame." Not very long after she had a daughter, with a skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, and she was named Snow White. And when she was born, the queen died. After a year had gone by, the king took another wife, a beautiful woman, but proud and overbearing, and she could not bear to be surpassed in beauty by anyone. She had a magic looking-glass, and she used to stand before it, and look in it, and say, "Looking-glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And the looking-glass would answer, "You are fairest of them all." And she was contented, for she knew that the looking-glass spoke the truth. Now Snow White was growing prettier and prettier, and when she was 7 years old she was as beautiful as day, far more so than the queen herself. So one day when the queen went to her mirror and said, "Looking-glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" it answered, "Queen, you are full fair, 'tis true, but Snow White fairer is than you." This gave the queen a great shock, and she became yellow and green with envy, and from that hour her heart turned against Snow White, and she hated her. And envy and pride, like ill weeds, grew in her heart higher every day, until she had no peace, day or night. At last she sent for a huntsman and said, "Take the child out into the woods, so that I may set eyes on her no more. You must put her to death, and bring me her heart for a token." The huntsman consented and led her away. But when he drew his cutlass to pierce Snow White's innocent heart, she began to weep and to say, "Oh, dear huntsman, do not take my life. I will go away into the wild wood and never come home again." And as she was so lovely, the huntsman had pity on her and said, "Away with you then, poor child," for he thought the wild animals would be sure to devour her, and it was as if a stone had been rolled away from his heart when he sped to put her to death. Just at that moment a young wild boar came running by, so he caught and killed it, and taking out its heart he brought it to the queen for a token, and it was salted and cooked, and the wicked woman ate it up, thinking that there was an end of Snow White. Now when the poor child found herself quite alone in the wild woods, she felt full of terror, even of the very leaves on the trees, and she did not know what to do for fright. Then she began to run over the sharp stones and through the thorn bushes, and the wild beasts after her, but they did her no harm. She ran as long as her feet would carry her, and when the evening drew near she came to a little house, and she went inside to rest. Everything there was very small, but as pretty and clean as possible. There stood the little table ready laid, and covered with a white cloth, and 7 little plates, and 7 knives and forks, and drinking cups. By the wall stood 7 little beds side by side, covered with clean white quilts. Snow White, being very hungry and thirsty, ate from each plate a little porridge and bread, and drank out of each little cup a drop of wine, so as not to finish up one portion alone. After that she felt so tired that she lay down on one of the beds, but it did not seem to suit her. One was too long, another too short, but at last the 7th was quite right, and so she lay down upon it, committed herself to heaven, and fell asleep. When it was quite dark, the masters of the house came home. They were 7 dwarfs, whose occupation was to dig underground among the mountains. When they had lighted their 7 candles, and it was quite light in the little house, they saw that someone must have been in, as everything was not in the same order in which they left it. The first said, "Who has been sitting in my little chair?" The second said, "Who has been eating from my little plate?" The third said, "Who has been taking my little loaf?" The fourth said, "Who has been tasting my porridge?" The fifth said, "Who has been using my little fork?" The 6th said, "Who has been cutting with my little knife?" The 7th said, "Who has been drinking from my little cup?" Then the first one, looking round, saw a hollow in his bed and cried, "Who has been lying on my bed?" And the others came running and cried, "Someone has been on our beds too." But when the 7th looked at his bed, he saw little Snow White lying there asleep. Then he told the others, who came running up, crying out in their astonishment, and holding up their 7 little candles to throw a light upon Snow White. "Oh goodness! Oh gracious!" cried they. "What beautiful child is this?" and were so full of joy to see her that they did not wake her, but let her sleep on. And the 7th dwarf slept with his comrades, an hour at a time with each, until the night had passed. When it was morning and Snow White awoke and saw the 7 dwarfs, she was very frightened, but they seemed quite friendly, and asked her what her name was, and she told them, and then they asked how she came to be in their house, and she related to them how her stepmother had wished her to be put to death, and how the huntsman had spared her life, and how she had run the whole day long, until at last she had found their little house. Then the dwarf said, "If you will keep our house for us, and cook and wash and make the beds, and sew and knit, and keep everything tidy and clean, you may stay with us, and you shall lack nothing." "With all my heart," said Snow White, and so she stayed, and kept the house in good order. In the morning the dwarfs went to the mountain to dig for gold. In the evening they came home, and their supper had to be ready for them. All the day long the maiden was left alone. The good little dwarfs warned her, saying, "Beware of your stepmother. She will soon know you are here. Let no one into the house." Now the queen, having eaten Snow White's heart, as she supposed, felt quite sure that now she was the first and fairest, and so she came to her mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And the glass answered, "Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair." Then she was very angry, for the glass always spoke the truth, and she knew that the huntsman must have deceived her, and that Snow White must still be living. And she thought and thought how she could manage to make an end of her, for as long as she was not the fairest in the land, envy left her no rest. At last she thought of a plan. She painted her face and dressed herself like an old peddler woman so that no one would have known her. In this disguise she went across the 7 mountains until she came to the house of the 7 little dwarfs, and she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell! Fine wares to sell!" Snow White peeped out of the window and cried, "Good day, good woman, what have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," answered she, "laces of all colours," and she held up a piece that was woven of variegated silk. "I need not be afraid of letting in this good woman," thought Snow White, and she unbarred the door and bought the pretty lace. "What a figure you are, child," said the old woman. "Come and let me lace you properly for once." Snow White, suspecting nothing, stood up before her and let her lace her with the new lace. But the old woman laced so quick and tight that it took Snow White's breath away, and she fell down as dead. "Now you have done with being the fairest," said the old woman as she hastened away. Not long after that, towards evening, the 7 dwarfs came home, and were terrified to see their dear Snow White lying on the ground, without life or motion. They raised her up, and when they saw how tightly she was laced, they cut the lace in 2. Then she began to draw breath, and little by little she returned to life. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said, "The old peddler woman was no other than the wicked queen. You must beware of letting anyone in when we are not here." And when the wicked woman got home, she went to her glass and said, "Looking glass against the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And it answered as before, "Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair." When she heard that, she was so struck with surprise that all the blood left her heart, for she knew that Snow White must still be living. "But now," said she, "I will think of something that will be her ruin." And by witchcraft she made a poisoned comb. Then she dressed herself up to look like another different sort of old woman. So she went across the 7 mountains and came to the house of the 7 dwarfs, and knocked at the door and cried, "Good wares to sell, good wares to sell." Snow White looked out and said, "Go away, I must not let anybody in." "But you're not forbidden to look," said the old woman, taking out the poisoned comb and holding it up. It pleased the poor child so much that she was tempted to open the door, and when the bargain was made, the old woman said, "Now, for once your hair shall be properly combed." Poor Snow White, thinking no harm, let the old woman do as she would, but no sooner was the comb put in her hair than the poison began to work, and the poor girl fell down senseless. "Now, you paragon of beauty," said the wicked woman, "this is the end of you," and went off. By good luck it was now near evening, and the 7 little dwarfs came home. When they saw Snow White lying on the ground as dead, they thought directly that it was the stepmother's doing, and looked about, found the poisoned comb, and no sooner had they drawn it out of her hair than Snow White came to herself and related all that had passed. Then they warned her once more to be on her guard, and never again to let anyone in at the door. And the queen went home and stood before the looking-glass and said, "Looking-glass against the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And the looking-glass answered as before, "Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair." When she heard the looking-glass speak thus, she trembled and shook with anger. "Snow White shall die," cried she, "though it should cost me my own life." And then she went to a secret lonely chamber where no one was likely to come, and there she made a poisonous apple. It was beautiful to look upon, being white with red cheeks, so that anyone who should see it must long for it, but whoever ate even a little bit of it must die. When the apple was ready, she painted her face and clothed herself like a peasant woman, and went across the 7 mountains to where the 7 dwarfs lived. And when she knocked at the door, Snow White put her head out of the window and said, "I dare not let anybody in. The 7 dwarfs told me not." "All right," answered the woman. "I can easily get rid of my apples elsewhere. There, I will give you one." "No," answered Snow White, "I dare not take anything." "Are you afraid of poison?" said the woman. "Look here, I will cut the apple in 2 pieces. You shall have the red side. I will have the white one." For the apple was so cunningly made that all the poison was in the rosy half of it. Snow White longed for the beautiful apple, and as she saw the peasant woman eating a piece of it, she could no longer refrain, but stretched out her hand and took the poisoned half. But no sooner had she taken a morsel of it into her mouth than she fell to the earth as dead. And the queen, casting on her a terrible glance, laughed aloud and cried, "As white as snow, as red as blood, as black as ebony, this time the dwarfs will not be able to bring you to life again." And when she went home and asked the looking-glass, "Looking-glass against the wall, who is fairest of us all?" at last it answered, "You are the fairest now of all."